think we have a good number. We'll jump in now. I'm sure some more folks will trickle in. So let me go to the next slide here. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Modern Change Academy series. Reminder, this series happens the fourth Thursday of every month, and it switches between topics across a couple different products. Today, we're going to be focusing on what is new with our latest release of digital product release. So I'll jump in. Before we go, we have our safe harbor. So this presentation will contain some forward-looking statements, particularly when we get into the roadmap. So please note these are based on our beliefs and assumptions right now, and these are all subject to change. Okay, so today we'll start up with some brief speaker introductions. Then we'll do a quick refresher on what DPR is, and then we'll spend the majority of the time walking through what's new in the February release, demoing all the new features, and then we'll end with a preview of the product roadmap. So with that, Colin, I'll let you introduce yourself first. You're on mute.
Yes, I am. So hello, everybody. My name is Colin O'Brien, and I am one of the product managers for digital product release. We also have Balaji, who is the other inbound product manager. He'll be helping with Q&A for this, but I'll be the one primarily presenting on what's new this time around.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. And my name is Greg Holvis, so I'm an outbound product manager. I run a lot of our customer adoption-focused events and programs. So you may have seen me at some of our other webinars in the past. Okay. With that. Okay. Now, before we jump in, we're going to run a couple of polls. This first one is just to get a sense of how familiar you are with DPR. So if you've heard about it, or if you've just started experimenting it, we're trying to get a sense of who is in the audience today. So let me run this first one. Okay. Take about 30 seconds or so. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. Okay, so a good chunk of you have not heard about it before, so welcome. Excited for you to learn about the product. Then we have some who have heard about it from a previous demo, a small bunch who have started experimenting in subprod, and then some of you who are planning to deploy. So great to see some of you who are further along in the pipeline. Excited to answer any questions you may have. For those folks who are newer, we're going to spend more of the time today talking about what's new and demoing those features. I will do a quick refresher on what DPR is, but I'll also post some links in the chat with to more introductory sessions where we can do deeper dives so you can really learn about the product. So I'll post some links to those recordings so you can continue learning there. Okay, second poll. Okay, now we want to get a sense of what types of releases are you currently managing, or what do you plan to use DPR for? So just getting a sense of what your intended use case is, and then just some info about your background. I think I have this first one as a single choice, so please just select your top use case here. And if you're in that other category, we'd love to hear about it in the chat. Okay, take a couple more seconds here. Oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and end this now and share the results. Seeing a good amount, about a third of the respondents who are looking for the entire life cycle. Okay. I've not looked at any of these others yet, but I'm excited to look through those. And then from the industry standpoint, we have a lot. Financial services, healthcare are the top two, which is not a big surprise. Manufacturing. Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, now we can jump into the rest. Okay, so before we jump in, like I said, we're going to spend most of the time today on the new features, but I'll do a little bit of a refresher of what DPR is and also share links to some content for folks to learn more. Okay, so DPR is a release process orchestrator. So it does not encompass the capabilities to do the build, testing, or deployment of a product. But what it does do is it ties these phases together as the layer validating when a product is ready to progress from one stage to the next. So this was our dedicated release application that we are launching, replacing our previous application, Release Management V2. So the way you use DPR, you first define the phases of a release using a release template. So these templates could differ depending on what type of release you're doing. It could be a major release that's a bit more complicated and it only comes out once a quarter, or a much simpler minor release template that has less phases. You see in this example here, we have 5 phases: planning, build, testing, prep, and deploy. It's generally some combination of phases like that that we see. Within these templates, we have tasks and policies aligned to each phase of the release. So what we're doing is we're ensuring that everybody can see what phase they're up to in the release, what tasks are outstanding, and what policies are in compliance or non-compliance. So by doing this, we add visibility and we give that visibility to all stakeholders. So we ensure that everyone's on the same page and they know what is keeping this version of this product from moving on to the next phase, and ultimately verifying that the product is ready to be moved into production. So really just a tool that orchestrates this whole process and acts as a gate to let everyone know when planning is done, we're ready to move to build, and et cetera. At the bottom here, you see all of our DevOps tools. So DPR integrates with our DevOps data model. And this is what allows us to connect planning to release. So we pull in data from all of our planning tools. So Jira as our DevOps, allowing us to map work items to specific versions and releases. Additionally, we can integrate with the broader CI/CD toolchain, so beyond just planning, and this helps automate readiness checks using our policies. So for example, we can pull in security scan data and run a policy against that data to check for compliance. So that individual no longer needs to sign off. We're just automating this using a policy and all of our data that we've imported. And then finally, on the right-hand side here, we see change. So historically, ServiceNow is focused a lot on change and a lot on the last mile. So it needs to happen just before deployment. So this is where customers created changes with tons of custom checks to validate if a code is ready to be, to validate if code is ready before it's pushed to production. With DPR, we're shifting all these checks left to ensure a broader range of criteria are met and validated at the time they happen before a change is logged and the code is deployed. So I'll pause there. Colin, do you want to add anything or Balaji?
No, this looks good. Some of this, as we go through the deck, as we get into the roadmap, we're looking to go more into the change side, but what DPR does today is really focus on validating that something's ready, and then change management is about actually, taking it to production.
Great. With that, I will send it over to you. Oh, I also forgot to mention this real quick. So this is a webinar format. You can't automatically come off mute. If you do have questions, please post them in the Q&A. We will have we'll all be monitoring it, and we'll respond to some directly in the Q&A. We'll also flag some to answer live and that folks come off mute. So please just log questions as they come up in the Q&A. That'd be great.
Okay, so
Jim, I see you raised your hand. Do you want to ask a question quick? Everybody jump in. 1 second. Okay, we'll do a quick question. Jim, if you want to come off mute.
yeah, so I'm not sure if Jim's able to come off mute. So for now, we'll continue, but if we need to come back to it, we can certainly do that.
Yep.
Okay, so again, this is going to be primarily focused on what's new. You'll be seeing when I go through the demo uh, portions of DPR that have been released prior, so you'll get a bit of a sense on how things work, but this is not designed to be like an end-to-end demo. As Greg said, he'll be posting links because we have recorded videos and recorded webinars where you can go in deeper for how just DPR works end-to-end. So I've got a couple of slides to start with that will kind of frame what the new features are, and then I'm going to switch over into my demo instance in order to actually show you them in action. So let's start with probably the biggest capability that we released in February, and really the reason why we have upped the version from the 1x versions of DPR into 2.0, which is multi-product release. So when DPR came out last February, we knew that we were, in order to get out an MVP that did meet some of our customers' needs, we focused on how do we release a single product. So if you were releasing just ITSM or change management, or you have one microservice that you work with, or one larger application, each of those would have its own dedicated release. So if you had 5 different products, even if they went together, you still would need to have 5 releases that you would manage. So starting with 2.0, we've been building actually over the past 6 months, but starting with the February release, we now have a consolidated way to manage multiple versions getting released that are all going together. So you'll be seeing, I'll show you how that works. We also enhanced the experience on how you create releases to kind of guide people through it, especially when they're new, to just help them get into how to create a release. So we also were getting feedback on how to link additional things into DPR. So we also shipped originally with the ability to have features. So what are the things that this product does? And they would be linked into a release. But one of the capabilities of release v2 was it could link any task type in ServiceNow into a release. The experience wasn't great, but the data model supported it. So with 2.0, we have added the ability to really associate anything that extends the task record in ServiceNow into a release so that you can manage those alongside the other items, whether they're features or stories, incidents or problems. They can all be added into a release starting with 2.0. So we've also been focused on how we build a stronger connection with our strategic portfolio management business unit. So starting in February, this was kind of a co-release because we needed them to add some pieces as well as us to add some pieces. So if you are a user of the strategic planning workspace, you can do your planning for your releases in SPW. Really, SPW is designed to better understand whether or not you should release something. We're focused really on the execution. So while you've been able to plan what are the features or enhancements that you want into a release, we didn't do anything that says why. Like, is this really the right item for you to work on? Does it align with your OKRs? Is it budgeted? things like that are outside the scope of DPR. And that's really what the strategic planning workspace is for. So starting in February, if you are using SPW, then you can view all of your products, features, and enhancements there and use it to decide, is this the right set of work that you're going to release? And then finally, we've increased our support with Agile 2.0. So if you are a user of Agile 2.0 and you want to do some of your release planning there, you'll be able to do it as well. So we introduced a similar concept for Jira back a few releases ago, where any Jira fix version would create a version inside of DPR. So that way, if you were planning with fixed versions in Jira, they would just show up in DPR without having to do additional planning. The same thing now works for Agile 2.0, where if you're using Scrum releases as your versions, then we will create the necessary version records and tie things together so you can do release planning in Agile 2.0, and you'll be able to manage the execution of that from within DPR. So with that, unless there are questions in the Q&A that I should switch to or answer before I go into my demo, otherwise I'll switch over and start going over those new features.
Yeah, Colin, we have one. I think you'll touch on this, I think, at some point. So,
Mhm.
how does DPR plan to handle COTS or SaaS product life cycles and version changes? It seems to be heavily designed to manage the entire product life cycles of in-house built software at the moment. It requires a lot of upfront work around building templates, etc.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things there. Well, yes, we do support the entire life cycle, but even for COTS software, we have, I think this was either our second or third customer to go live. They were managing primarily their ServiceNow upgrades. There were a couple of customers that we had early on that were planning to manage like their Epic upgrades. Our first customer actually was along the lines of SAP. So you can certainly use ServiceNow to support your release process for COT software. Usually it's just what you're not maybe as concerned with what features that are going in, but just more the validation. So the templates would be geared toward that. Something we are looking into is increasing our content pack, which right now is focused on policies alone, to include different templates for different kinds of COT software that just aligns with best practices for those items. So that's the thing we're investigating in order to make it easier to connect to, like, here's how you should do an SAP release, or here's how you should do an Epic release, things like that. But we still need to know what your process is, so you're probably still going to modify templates in order to support COT software. But we're not exclusive to custom. You can certainly manage the versions. One other thing to note is if you are using software asset management, then the versions that come from software asset management will just be in DPR. So for instance, if you're using SAM and there's a new version of ServiceNow that's coming out, and SAM detects that and creates the various records in SAM, those records will actually show up in DPR. They'll be the same record, so you're able to manage that. So if you are using SAM, you can think of SAM as basically populating those versions, so you don't have to do it manually. Any other questions in the Q&A before I switch over?
I think we're good to go.
Okay. Okay, so I have switched over into my instance because most of the changes that were done are more user-focused than admin-focused. I'm logged in as Aileen, who is a product owner, and she has, in fact, I've just given her a lot of the products within our demo data in my instance. So again, starting with 2.0, we have the ability to have multi-product releases. But I first want to kind of show how those function, like how we actually would be able to quickly put together a multi-product release. And that starts with something we actually released back in August of last year, and then made some enhancements for the setup. So here I have a list of all of my products. And one of them, this FMR loan origination, is the one I'm going to dive into. So when I go into the overview for FMR loan, there's a tab that we added in August, which allowed you to start identifying what are the additional included products that make up this larger FMR loan, origination product. And in this case, I just have kind of two microservices. I have another example with my Smart Shopper, where the included products for it also include additional products underneath. So we allow you to define the kind of hierarchy of products. And we use the term included products because it's not like a parent-child relationship. Maybe I need to include one of the microservices from FMR Loan in this as well for some reason. Then I could link it here, and that microservice would have effectively two parents. Because these are simply products that are included. Now, we are hiding complexity when doing this. So when you're adding additional items, there's a record in between that's a part of the CMDB because we are very reliant on the CMDB. We don't require that you have a robust CMDB to start with, but we're going to help you kind of get into that mode because all the records we're creating are going to be CMDB records and they're going to be using the proper ways to associate things. So by adding it, there's a record that's being created that links all of this together, but you don't have to step through all the many-to-many relationships to get this set up correctly or to fill out the additional fields that might be necessary to just make sure all the data is good. So we do that in a variety of places, including when doing the included products here. Now, the reason this becomes important is because when you create a multi-product release, so I'm going to navigate now into the releases, and I'm going to click on Create Release. This is something that we enhanced in November, but we further enhanced it to support multi-product release with February. So if I were to create like my FMR loan, I'm not going to step through every step of this way, but I do want to show how with FMR, if I type in FMR, and I choose the FMR loan origination, it's going to detect that there were additional included products, and it's then going to allow me to, well, it's going to bring them in automatically into this release. Now, let's say microservice number 2, I don't need to include, then I can always remove it. But we pull in by default all of the included products from within FMR loan in this case is the parent product that's selected. We will pull in all of its child products. Now, with multi-product release, you do not have to have all of this defined within that product hierarchy. So in fact, if I said, hey, I also need to do this authentication, and I'm going to add it into the list, then this will also be included in my multi-product release that we'll be looking at in just a moment. So when you're creating these, we will automatically pull in included products to kind of streamline the process, but you're not restricted to those child products. You can pull in really any product. I had a customer early on where they were a customer doing Epic. They're like, we might also do Zoom in this release. So we'd want to pull in Epic and all of the modules that are getting impacted in Epic, but we also want to pull in Zoom and include that in this particular release. And so this supports that ability to pull in any product, but we will streamline it, not make you pull in each one individually by pulling in the included products. So from there, you would then select which versions that you are going to be releasing, because a release is releasing something. Versions are that something. This one doesn't have any that are available, so I'll just remove it. But now that I'm specifying that the 4.3 is what we are going through, I would then be able to select my template. So this could be like a major release. This will tell me about the phases of this particular release. And then I can select my release target. I need to select a calendar to choose from. So that I could say, hey, we're going to be releasing this, maybe sometime in March. And I'd then be able to select that target and create the release. Again, I'm not going to actually create the release for today because I already have several releases, but this gives you the ability to kind of walk through in a more wizard-like fashion, the ability to create a release. Now, even though we have this new way to create a release by walking through in a more of a guided setup, um, we still have the older modal. So if you already know all of this and you don't need to walk through multiple steps, then you can still do it through the what we call now quick create. So you can give it a name, choose the product, the version, the template, the readiness targets, and that will be just a faster way for people that have done this before and don't need the kind of guided tour in order to get your release up and running. Okay, so with the background on how to kind of create those multi-product releases, again, those were actually both introduced, one in November and the other in August. What's new is being able to manage these multi-product releases. Oh, actually, I chose a single product release. Let me back out for a moment and find my FMR 4.1. No, where is my... So I'd walk through this, yeah, release mode. Where is my multi-product release? So we added a column so that you can see which ones are independent and which ones are, yeah, there we go, multi-product. So it looks like it was Smart Shopper, not FMR, that I had set up before. So for Smart Shopper, I created a February Smart Shopper, and now we have a new dashboard that brings together all of the things, kind of aggregates all of the tasks, all of the policies across all of the releases, treats it like it's a single release, but we are still validating each of the products within this multi-product release. We validate each of them independently. So while we are treating this as if it were one release, let's say for some reason the Smart Shopper cart was not meeting its particular policies. In that case, the cart product would not be listed as compliant, but the rest of them would be. So, you know, we're still validating each of the products independently, but we're treating it as one release. So you only have to manage one entity. But still, again, getting the details were needed. So if you just needed to find out what's going on with the cart product, then you'd be able to drill in and just see what's going on with just cart, even though we are rolling up everything across all of these products within the release. So the dashboard is going to be showing the dashboard as the overall across all of the releases. Now, if you want to drill into a particular release, then you can, by choosing the drop down here that currently says all products, you can drill into a particular release. Now, we have whatever the primary one is kind of called out. So Smart Shopper was my primary product that I chose when setting up the release, but we also include all of the additional ones as well. But if I wanted to drill into just Smart Shopper, then I can go into the overview now, and this overview is based on the original single product release, but it's now only focused on the data for just this one product. This is not seeing a roll up. This isn't seeing across multiple. This is now the data that's going on for just this one product within the multi-product release. I can also still track the execution. From a single product perspective, I can still see the policies and the status of these policies, which are currently non-compliant at the moment. So I'm able to drill down when I get into these individual views. And it's within this drill down view that we come into the ability to attach additional items to the release. So this was the other kind of big capability that we released with our February release. And that is being able to have more than just enhancements as what you can manage as the scope of the release. So when I was in release planning, I didn't go into this because, again, this isn't an end-to-end demo. We had enhancements that were planned into this release. If you're using the strategic planning workspace, you can also plan planning items from SPW. We also allow for any task type to be added into DPR. Now, which task types that you have available, that's controlled through a property. So this isn't just open to any. when you're going through and setting up, there is a property that you will specify which task type records that you want to show up on this list. So you have the flexibility of choosing whichever ones you want, but that way your users aren't overwhelmed with just everything in one place. So I'm able to see, here are my incidents. I don't have any problems that are associated. If I want to, I can add them by clicking on the add button. And this will then show me products, which I can select. I can then click on add, and I will now have several problem records that have been added into the scope of this release. So again, any task type is possible. Which ones are available are through a property that's in our documentation, that an admin can select which ones are available. So when you're viewing by individual product, this view is pretty much the exact same as when you were looking at a single product release. These are just pulled, entirely from that. When you are in the all products view, we do restrict what shows up here for now. So the release scope goes away. We're doing that until we have a good user experience that doesn't become overwhelming. Because especially if you have, like, let's say you're doing a ServiceNow upgrade and you have 30 ServiceNow products that are being updated, and you want to see all of the stories that are being worked on, that could be, hundreds or more of stories alone. Maybe there are incidents that are being resolved or problems that are being resolved. It can become overwhelming. So we are exploring how to provide the release scope view in an aggregate form, but we don't have a good experience yet that we've designed. So we've removed that one. But you're still able to manage the execution as a whole, seeing all the policies across all of the various products. And you're also able to see still the change requests, and these will be grouped by the products themselves, but this will be the list of all change requests across all of the products within this multi-product release. So again, multi-product release was the kind of largest feature that was in 2.0 of DPR. We have more enhancements coming. We've got some UX additions that just didn't make it into the initial release that are now in our backlog, and we're scoping to add them just to, again, add more things like the scoping of the release scope, seeing all of those. So you'll be seeing continued enhancements in this area. But for the first release, this kind of goes over the bulk of what is a multi-product release. I wanted to touch on the SPM integrations as well, but I want to pause for a moment just to see if there are any questions that I should talk through as a whole, if there are any in the Q&A or any chats before I continue.
Yeah, we do have some that would be good to discuss live. They aren't directly related to multi-product. So you can either address them now or we can address them later on. But right now we have one. Are the microservices to product association in the CMDB? It's the first one.
Yes. So in the for DPR, everything is a product. So a microservice is a product. You probably have a product owner who manages and works with a team that works on that microservice. So even though microservice has service in the name, it's a digital product. It's software. So we treat everything as a product. They're just some of them are different sizes. So it is a record in the CMDB. In this case, get a little on the technical side, and you could see it a bit. I try and hide terminology that doesn't have a broad applicability. So for instance, we have this term here, application model. That's the actual table that all of these digital products reside within. This is based on the CSDM, so the Common Services Data Model. This is where your version lists, so things like iOS would be an application model, whereas iOS 18.1 or whatever we're on, that would reside in another table that's changing with V5. So I don't want to go too far into the weeds on data model there, because that one's actually changing. But we are putting these in the CMDB. Now, when you deploy this, you're generally deploying it to an application service, but we're not restricting where you deploy it to. There are best practices that ServiceNow recommends, like using app service, but a lot of customers will use business service. Um, Other customers will just use the application, the CMDB, CI, APPL table. Some have created their own. And maybe you want to deploy it, maybe you have a microservice CI class that you want to deploy to. Those are all fine. We don't take a hard stance on the operational side. We are simply making sure that the kind of design side, the side where you say, here are my products, here are my versions, those have very specific tables, and we're putting them there without confusing people that don't know terms like application model. I try and hide those table names that don't have a broad kind of terminology understanding wherever I can. But so those microservices are in the app model table, as is the higher level that's not a microservice. That's also residing in the application model table.
Great. And then one more was how can associate a product to an environment where I want to release it to?
So that is on our roadmap. I have designs for it. If it's something that you're interested in, then we can take a note and I'd love to go through and validate those designs. So that is planned right now for the second half of this year on being able to associate what your environments are directly within DPR. And we similarly would be creating the right CI links to make sure everything is connected. Um, but yeah, that's currently on my roadmap. I don't have a way today from our UX to do that. There are ways behind the scenes, just using list and forms, but I don't have an experience for connecting them. So if you're interested in that, if you'd like to help get feedback on the designs, then certainly indicate that, and we'll reach out to set up those sessions.
Okay, good to move forward.
Okay. So I need to end the impersonation so that I can go into SPW. So again, I'm going to only be going over the highlights for SPW, so that we're able to just kind of see generally how this works. So starting in February, if you are an SPM user, then some of this should be familiar. But if you were to create a new portfolio plan, the SPM team has built a new lens called the Digital Product Lens that connects the application model. So these are your digital products, to the product features, enhancements, and then the ideas and epics that are also related to those enhancements. I've already made one, so I'm not going to create another one. But this digital product lens was added in February. So I'm going to discard this plan, and I'm going to go into my Smart Shopper plan. Now, I created one that is only for Smart Shopper. So generally, you would have this a bit more broadly. But I put this one together where it's filtered to show only things related to Smart Shopper. And we now have within our roadmap, we can specify the product features that we have, or sorry, the product enhancements that we have, and when they're going to be worked on. So in DPR, you're able to associate when you're going to release them, but we don't do broader roadmap planning. That is something that SPW is really designed to do. So if you needed to create new enhancements, I'd recommend that you do it from SPW. SPW is a better planning tool than DPR wants to be. So if you're really trying to roadmap things, not only when you're going to release it, but when you might start working on it, if you want to be able to share those roadmaps, if you're wanting to, again, associate these with OKRs and things like that, SPW is the place to do it. And then you're also, by switching into the Kanban view, you'd be able to see all of your releases and plan not only from a roadmap perspective on when you're going to start, but which release these are going to be planned into. And if you do this planning in SPW, it will look the exact same as in DPR, so that you will not need to do planning into places. These are the same records, these are the same version records that we use, these are the same product enhancement records that we use. So you will be able to specify, here is when we plan on releasing, here's the versions that we plan on releasing these enhancements within. So again, that's I'm not going to do a full demo of SPW, but the lens was released, and then the ability to say here are the versions that they're going to be released within. That was added for better connection with SPW. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to go over the roadmap. So I'm going to switch back into my PowerPoint and go through the roadmap. So we are now to the futures section of this demonstration. So that safe harbor slide is very relevant at this point because these are based on our current feedback from our customers. Because we are a new product, we routinely meet with customers that have either deployed or are close to deploying to learn if there are any blockers, if there are any enhancements that would really help with expanding usage, with getting initial usage. So we review our roadmap quarterly and go through it with our customers. So we shift things around based on demand. So this is what our current plans are. There are two in red boxes that are fairly substantial. Planned for May, we have the support service releases. DPR today is really focused on software and software alone. So all of our releases are releasing software. But we've gotten feedback from customers that they tend to roll that software into services, and services are kind of the top level item that they want to release. So I had a customer in the fintech in banking that they would have something like supporting Git, like their source code control service that the cloud management team provides. And the source code control service was then supported by GitHub and GitLab and some custom stuff that they had built and some automated review processes. All of those were software supporting the service, and they'd want to be able to release a service of we're updating how we support managing source code control. So in May, we plan on having service releases as an entity that you can define and manage your releases for. We also have some other items like automating the creation of the version records themselves, having holiday calendars, help with the release scheduling. So there are some smaller things, but service releases is the biggest one, and I've got a slide dedicated to it. And then in the second half, the big one is managing complex rollout plans. This also is a part of the environment management that you can see down in the third item here, the environment management. But managing complex rollout plans is where, let's take like a patching use case. And we've made sure that this patch of Windows Server isn't going to like take down the whole internet. And once we've validated that, which is what DPR does today, we might have hundreds of Windows servers that we need to roll this out to. Having one change request creates problems because now you have a change request with hundreds of affected CIs. Maybe one of those affected CIs is a critical system, and so now the whole change has to go to cab. I have tens to maybe 100 people that have got to review it. That's not great. So how do we manage these larger rollouts of things that you've validated? Or similarly with the microservice, maybe we've got 10 microservices that are all interrelated and we want to release them. Do I have to create 10 change requests? What if it's 50? Do I have to create 50 change requests? Nobody enjoys managing 50 change requests. So how do we streamline this process of managing how you roll out the things that DPR has validated? This is a joint effort with the change management team. So we're working together on how we make change easier, giving you visibility without a lot of overhead. And with this kind of comes environment management, because we need to know what CIs we're going to be rolling out to. So being able to specify, here are the environments, here are the environments that are going to be in certain waves. Those all come into play. And so I'm gonna drill into those too. So service release as I said, it's really about defining your services within the CMDB. And these are going to be, again, the design side, not the operational side. So today you have like your business services that are in the CMDB. They should have service models that are in the product model space. So we're going to help streamline how those get created so that you have those services, and then using the same UX you saw earlier, being able to define what are the child applications, what's the software that supports those services. Now we are still limited to software. Hardware is another item that we are looking into supporting, as well as things like AI and other areas. We're going to be expanding beyond just services and software to hopefully everything by next year, anything that needs to go through a release. Um, but we're starting again, services and software or digital products are what will be in this initial release. So you'll be able to include software within those services. And then when you create, like you can kind of see it, it's kind of small, but in this, this is a screenshot taken from a team demo, like a sprint demo from yesterday. So in this case, there's a service product that has an additional included product of an application. And that way you'll be able to manage the release, the service release that may or may not include additional pieces of software underneath it. And then finally, the other one, this one I'm wanting to highlight because we are still doing exploration as to how this would work. So with managing these complex rollouts, if this resonates with you, I would love for you to drop a note in the chat so that we can do additional interviews on what this process looks like within your organization. So again, the idea is there would be something above a change request. What that is, we're still discussing. You can kind of think of it as a parent change. It itself is not a change request. It's more of something larger. Maybe it's just a release itself. Maybe there's a new entity, like we've used the term major change as a placeholder, but it would then help to streamline the creation, the authorization of the changes underneath so that every CI that is changing would have its own change request. That way you'd have an easier time where maybe only one or two of the changes need to go to cab. But the other, 98 don't need to go to cab. Maybe we schedule them in waves. So instead of having the change request, scheduled for several weeks, we have 10 of the changes scheduled on one weekend. We have 20 scheduled in the next wave, another weekend. And even more of the changes scheduled for a following weekend. So it allows us to have better conflict detection, better scheduling. We want to streamline the authorization and make sure that we're only sending the right changes to cab instead of sending everything to cab when you have a really, really overloaded change request with tons of CIs inside of it. This also works when you're doing multi-product, where you have where you have maybe 10 microservices, but it's got to go through integration testing. And we just want to make sure that it goes through our system integration testing before it gets into our second round of integration testing. And we have policies that say, there had to have been a deployment in SIT before we move into staging. And we had to do a successful staging before we moved into prod. So these complex rollouts are not just about patching, they're also about how we can separate these out into multiple phases of rolling out these more complex multi-product releases. So again, if this is something that resonates, I'm currently working on scheduling interviews because the user experience for this is going to be very important. I've seen what some customers have built custom, and a lot of it I'm honestly quite impressed with, but we want to make sure that it's not overwhelming. If you're someone who has 20 CIs within that 100, wouldn't it be great if you only had one entity to deal with that contained those 20 CIs you were able to manage independently, while someone else managed just theirs. So this is an important area that we're looking to support in the second half of this year. So please, if this resonates, drop us a note so that we can reach out and interview you.
Yeah,
And with that,
I put my email in the chat.
Perfect.
So please just shoot me an email. It's thomas.hollis@servicenow.com just to make sure we have the right contact details for you. And then I'm
And with
also
that, I'd like to
posting,
leave.
oh, real quick, I'm
Yeah,
also
go ahead.
posting some links in the chat. Um, so they are coming in a second. For folks who want to learn more about DPR, particularly some of the new folks and just other webinars, recordings we have and content out there. So posting those now.
Okay, so I'd like to make sure that we leave at least about 5 minutes at the end for any questions we haven't gotten to, or maybe Greg or Balaji, if there are questions that you answered but would be good to share more broadly. This time is really for any additional questions that haven't been asked.
Colin, there is one question. Can you touch on automated product versioning some, please? So could you talk about the automated product versioning? Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So today, when you switch back into DPR, the process that works today is that we have our products, and within these products, we have our versions, and you have to create a version, and it's through a request because this is creating things in the CMDB. So we have a request system that auto approves by default, but you could change this if there needs to be a process involved on creating these records. But you have to create a version before you come over into a release and create a release. And actually, because the sysadmin does not have the right roles, so let me go back to Eileen and create a release. So, and you may have even noticed when I chose when I chose one of these, I'll just pick this one. You'll notice that there's no version information here. So immediately I'm stopped from going further. A version has to exist before you create a release. So in May, we're planning to basically auto create. So when you create the release, if there's no version, we'll create the version record for you. Really treating a release and a version as, I mean, they're linked together very closely. So we can generate this for you. And especially when you start adding in children. So for instance, if I do the smart shopper, if I don't have them, like these are already in use, now I have to create a version for all of these entities. And that's just additional administrative overhead. So planned in May is we will create these for you. So a release and a version you don't have to do a version first. Versions can just be created when you create the release record. So that's the core of what auto creating version for May is going to entail. And Balaji, since I think this is one that you own, if you've got more details that you want to share, you can certainly go into more details.
No, Colin, not at the moment. Maybe we can maybe record a demo and share it with anybody who's
Yeah.
interested.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes, we do have some in the chat, or sorry, in the Q&A. Looking through, let's just go through them as they have come up. So we had, how are the micro releases in GitHub create a change in ServiceNow? And is that change created after the micro releases are successful? How are approvals in GitHub flow into ServiceNow?
Yeah, so today we connect with GitHub mainly to pull in the source code and tie it into the work items that are being worked on. And if you also are using DevOps change velocity, then you can orchestrate creating a change request as a part of your CI/CD pipeline through GitHub Actions. So when you're doing that, and I think I may have in one of these FMR Maybe it's this. Maybe it's the Smart Shopper. No, this one doesn't have it. I don't want to hunt for it, but any change request that's created through DevOps Change Velocity would actually, you can link it to a release. It's optional. So if you specify the version that you're releasing, then we will connect the change to the release. And how that can be helpful is that automating change typically involves looking at a release to make sure that all of the policies are compliant. So we have all of these policies that are defined. Probably, yeah, I just randomly picked one, and of course I don't have policies for this really old demo data. But if you're wanting to streamline change by having the change connected to the version that is being deployed, you can actually make it easier to automate the authorization of that change. So it could say, hey, is this version authorized? If it's not, then the change doesn't go through. Or if it is authorized, then again, that's simplifying the authorization process. So if you're using DevOps Change Velocity and you have GitHub Actions raising the change request, all you have to do is specify which version you want it to be, and then it will be tied to the release, which should help simplify your change authorization process. That one, we'd have to spend a lot more time if we wanted to go into the details of it, but to DPR, a change is a change. So whether it comes from manually creating the new change button, or if it comes from DevOps Change Velocity, to us, it's all listed here as a change for this release. And I see that we're right on time. If there's another quick question, again, happy to answer. But otherwise, I do want to thank everybody for joining today. We do have our community site that you can find additional information on. Greg's put links in the chat, so you can find that as well. But we put a lot of content. We're going to be refreshing a lot of the recorded videos now that we have multi-product release out. But there's, again, a lot of good introductions. We did a good launch and learn series, and we have a lot of how-to videos. So if you want to learn more, the community site is a really good place to do that. Greg, anything else as we wrap up for today?
No, posted those links. If you have any questions, you want to discuss more detail, just reach out directly to one of us. My email's in the chat. For any, there's been some confusion. The email is thomas.hollis. It's the same as me, Greg. Greg is my middle name. So some folks were asking about that. You can also post questions directly to the forum on our DPR community site, and we do a pretty good job of answering those as fast as we can. So a couple different ways to get your questions answered. And really appreciate you all joining today.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.